Hello, one and all. We are back for our 9th webinar of 2023. In January, we covered the PSTI legislation and vulnerability disclosure. In February, it was 𝗂𝗵𝗿𝗶. March was the Smart Built Environment. April was the European Cyber Resilience Act and international labeling. In May, it was Industrial IoT, followed by Engineering Trustworthy AI. That was the topic back in June. July was Zero Trust Architecture from First Principles, and last month it was all about 𝗬𝗎's Enterprise IoT Cyber Policy. The recordings for all of those broadcasts that I've just reeled off are available to IoTSF members on our members-only platform. You feel free to binge watch them all if you so choose. If you're not an IoTSF member, then go to IoTSecurityFoundation.org/join. So on to today's webinar guest. I'm delighted to welcome Jennifer Williams, who's going to be one of the speakers at the 2023 IoTSF conference. Jennifer is the Director of IT and Operations at Secarma, as well as IoT Lead Assessor. I should say Secarma are also platinum sponsors at November's 2023 IoT Security Foundation annual conference. Today, she is joined by 𝗬𝗵𝗿𝗄, who is the IoT Certification Scheme Manager at the IASME Consortium. Jason's also going to be speaking at the 2023 IoTSF conference on the subject of what actually is best practice. I should say, despite the fact that Jennifer and Jason are involved in the conference, today's webinar is not a presentation that you're going to see and hear at the conference. So without further ado, the road to the 2023 IoTSF Security Foundation conference continues now unabated with today's webinar presentation entitled Threat Modeling for Beginners. So I will hand you over to Jason, and first I think it is Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen to kick us off.
Thanks for that lovely introduction there, Chris, as well. That's fantastic.
No problem.
There we go. Okay, Jason, it's all yours.
Okay, so as Chris said, this is not a presentation you're going to see at the conference. This is something that we've put together to deliver today. We felt that it was an interesting topic and something that myself and Jennifer know quite a bit about and have worked quite closely on. So it will be about threat modeling, but I'm just going to go into a quick introduction. If you don't know who IASME are, we are the providers of the Cyber Essentials program within the UK, which is owned by the NCSC. We also do other schemes such as Maritime Cyber Baseline and Cyber Assurance. However, as Chris said in my introduction, I am the Certification Scheme Manager for the IoT program. Moving on to a little bit about me, my history is in physical security. My responsibility is for the growth of the IoT Cyber Assurance scheme within the UK. I manage a network of certification bodies and assessors, of which Jennifer is one of our lead assessors. And we connect IoT experts with industry and speak at many different and varied events, such as manufacturing, to try and raise awareness of the PSTI legislation and how our scheme can help businesses show compliance with that.
Shall I introduce Secarma quickly? I just wanted to, instead of doing a who we are, just give you a little bit about our credentials in the IoT space. So Jason tells me we are the largest team of IASME certified IoT assessors. We also have a number of experts within our business who are hardware hackers and specialist IoT testers. We went to Vegas a couple of years ago and actually won the hackathon at Black Hat, which was a smart light bulb. So yeah, we have some pedigree in this area. We also got involved in the IASME IoT scheme because a large proportion of our clients work in sectors that use a lot of IoT, and we're already working with those clients on their security. We have a broad range of kind of technical testers and compliance and assurance projects that we do with IoT manufacturers and distributors. My history, I've been director of IT. I've been an IT director now for 10 plus years. ISO 27001 lead auditor and 𝗬𝗫 Plus lead assessor. I'm also a penetration tester, so I've a mix of kind of technical and compliance type of skills. My major passion is helping small and medium enterprises get started with cybersecurity. I've spent quite a large proportion of my career working in some heavily regulated industries. So if there's a pain point with security, trust me, I have felt it before.
Okay, so we're going to talk to you about threat modeling and an introduction to threat modeling today. First of all, what is threat modeling? There's two very different definitions there on the screen for you. I'm not going to bore you to death and read those word for word, but threat modeling is looking at, for me anyway, what can go right and what can go wrong, and how you can move that forward, and how you can best assess the threats that you may face in the development stage of whether that be an IoT product, whether that's software, app development, whatever it may be. But it's looking at to find those problems as early as possible in that journey.
Yeah, it's primarily a risk management activity. So rather than going into technical testing, threat modeling is supposed to be a risk management activity that can inform how you allocate resources to dealing with that risk.
Which moves quite nicely onto the threat modeling versus penetration testing. As Jen said, threat modeling is theoretical. It's non-invasive. It can be used and conducted with internal resources within the business. So you don't need to potentially, what's the word I'm looking for, to bring in external sort of problems maybe or anything to the business. And you can identify threats very, very early on at the creation phase of a device or software. And it's very much a tabletop exercise rather than penetration testing, which obviously you require a lot of technical expertise to run. It's quite invasive for a product or for software. As Jen said, they won the IoT hackathon in Las Vegas. Personally, I think she was just bragging that they'd been to Las Vegas, but there is a massive difference between threat modeling and penetration testing. However, you will need a third party for threat modeling to sort of oversee and guide you through the exercise. It's not something. Whereas with penetration testing, somebody can do that for you. Threat modeling is working with you to work together to actually go through that process and that exercise. So, what kind of businesses should threat model? If you are developing any IoT device or software, absolutely, threat modeling is something that you should do and consider earlier on in the production process. Those utilizing third-party APIs, those with complex business processes. Again, as that bullet point says, for those whose data loss could cause catastrophic business damage or reputation damage. And again,
sorry, Jason, I heard a statistic recently around kind of catastrophic business damage that around 70% of businesses who are categorized as SMEs, once they've suffered a data loss, actually don't ever recover and don't actually ever open the doors again. So I think anybody in the SME market can probably consider themselves under that point.
Absolutely, and those businesses that hold sensitive data, because the last thing anybody holding that sensitive data wants is some sort of data leak, data breach, to then have to deal with the potential fallout from that potential attack. Jen, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. So this is, I'm usually asked by businesses when I'm talking about threat modeling, what kind of systems can you use threat modeling for? And actually, the really obvious one is to look at software and web apps. But threat modeling, because of its kind of risk management advantages, is relevant to all kinds of processes, even paper-based systems. So we conducted an exercise recently with a company who transferred medical data around on paper, and actually their best way they could find of testing that system and evaluating its security was to do a threat modeling activity on it, because it's actually really difficult to find somebody who can do penetration testing of paper-based systems. But it's particularly useful for kind of physical infrastructure, even business processes. So, if you're in a business that handles a lot of sensitive data, actually you're going to want to be really careful about who you're hiring into the business. So you may choose to also threat model your business processes, not just your technology and infrastructure and paper-based activities.
So why threat model? There's a list of reasons why, but working down there, detecting problems early in the development life cycle before building that device or that piece of code has even begun.
We've seen actually a few times where we've gone and done penetration testing on devices where it'll be kind of quite a small entrepreneurial company that will have had this really great idea. They'll have put it into production and then tested it at the end of that production, only to find that they've built security flaws in during their design phase. And it's kind of devastating for them, because then the cost of going back and unpicking all of that and redeveloping it is huge compared to had they have gone through this threat modeling process at the start of that process. So there are some real examples that I can share about, where this would have been a much more cost-effective way of finding vulnerabilities than waiting to test at the end.
And as Jennifer says, the cost of remediating those problems at the beginning of the design phase are a lot less than at the end of the process. And for any business, never mind as an SME, that actually trying to keep those costs as low as possible is key, especially in the current climate of such as with the cost of living and business, and entrepreneurs trying to strike out to build their devices, that actually a threat modeling exercise at the beginning of the process may actually have saved a lot of money further down the line. Looking at other things as well as saving money, but it allows you to spot design flaws that traditional testing methods may overlook. One of the things that if you're building an IoT device, that you may look at things and think this is the way we want this device to work, and have a great idea as to how this actually comes together, but everything's been done the same way. Actually, using threat modeling can actually assist you to look in a different perspective and think, actually, we can see things slightly differently if we approach it that in a different way. But again, that also helps then maximize those testing budgets to make sure that actually the device or the software is up to scratch and is not only more effective, but actually it's better put together and is more secure as a whole moving forward. When you're looking at threat modeling as to why it should be more of a standard practice than it probably is, thinking about the threats beyond standard attacks, to those security issues that are unique to your IoT device. Many IoT devices are manufactured by small businesses with 1, 2, 3 employees. They don't have huge budgets to spend on security. They don't even have sometimes a great deal of knowledge about security. So actually allowing them to threat model and helping and working with them and threat modeling those devices actually gives them a greater understanding of security. It also allows them to find those vulnerabilities earlier in the process and to find different perspectives and different points of view of looking at different approaches for the device to actually ensure that the device is more secure and actually helps combat against those vulnerabilities that can be found quite easily. But again, it allows businesses to take that risk-based approach to fixing a security issue. So they may be aware of a security issue. They may think, actually, that's enough risk. We're okay with the risk that's there. Or actually, they may find a vulnerability that says, oh, actually, we're not okay with the risk that's there. With a smart kettle, for example, if there was a vulnerability that allowed the switch for it allowed to be made to stay on boil beyond the boiling point, that could potentially cause a huge health and safety issue, and that's a risk that I'm pretty sure that manufacturer wouldn't be willing to take. So there is a whole host of different reasons why threat modeling actually can really, really help. When to threat model is always the question. My sort of opinion would always be as early on in that design processes as possible to try and minimize the remediation costs moving forward. definitely prior to deployment or any sort of stage of an upgrade or a systems update for that device. And as it says there, in response to world events, because I'm sure we all remember the last couple of years where we were forced to live in our houses and not go to work or not mix with other people, and those sort of huge seismic events are the sort of thing where actually a threat modeling for a device that, for example, would say if off the top of my head, to create a smart app to track your activity, actually threat modeling it during the middle of a pandemic would say actually now is probably not the time to release that app, because actually you're not going to get much traction with it, and it may go quietly because actually no one's doing that. So again, it's those significant world events also give a really good platform for us to when, and a sort of timescale as to when to threat model.
I'm thinking as well, so if you're in the energy sector and you may have wanted to reevaluate your threat modeling activities, you know, when the Ukraine war happened, or you know, Russia make all kinds of announcements about what they're going to do to world energy. Those kind of things would normally trigger an update of the threat modeling activities. Okay, so this is now about what you expect at the end of a threat modeling exercise. So the outcomes of it, you'll have a data flow diagram that shows all the entry points into your system. Now, this is great not only for your kind of risk management and vulnerability management, but has other uses. So when you're looking at data flow diagrams, you're helping compliance with other standards that you might need to meet. Most importantly, you'll have a prioritized list of potential vulnerabilities. So like Jason said earlier, you won't want to automatically treat all of those vulnerabilities, but you can look at what your appetite is for those different types of risks, and decide whether it's appropriate to go back and have a redesign of that area. I often find when I'm conducting threat modeling exercises with businesses that they find other efficiencies as a result of their threat modeling activities, and as a result of thinking about, actually, do we really need to spin up this other AWS service, or could we keep our data flow to a minimum by doing it like this? So they're saving costs as well as identifying vulnerabilities. You'll also have a series of contingency plans. So if you've threat modeled correctly, you'll think about what you can possibly do if, let's say, that scenario does materialize. So you'll naturally have the start of some disaster recovery and business continuity plans as a result of a really good threat modeling exercise. Back to you, Jason, I think, for this one.
Yeah, one of the things that you're always asked about threat modeling is should we do it as a board? Should as a board of directors we threat model our new application? And the answer is absolutely not. You need those people, those developers that are there on the front line creating the app. They're the people that need to be involved in the threat modeling exercise, because they're the ones that have got their fingers in the pie effectively to know what's happening with the app, what's the ins and outs and the inner workings of that. It's those with the deep knowledge of the business process that, so for example, HR are often one to include because they own a lot of the business processes. So it's those sorts of people that need to be involved that actually at a SME level you might find might be most of the business, but at bigger corporations and at a higher level with sort of bigger businesses, actually it's still those frontline people that are involved in the day-to-day creation of the product or the application that need to be involved.
So we often get asked at Secarma, can you come in and do threat modeling for us?
That was my next
sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So my answer is always a firm no. So we can't come and do your threat modeling for you. We can facilitate, but actually a third party is so unlikely to have the level of knowledge about how your data processes work and how your systems work, that we just wouldn't be able to do a very good job of it. So absolutely get a third party to facilitate for you and ask the right questions, but ultimately it's your developers and your hands-on staff that are the most valuable during a threat modeling exercise. Which brings me on to actually another one of the business benefits. I was having a conversation with somebody at an event I was at recently about threat modeling, And he pointed out that actually there are huge cultural benefits as well to a business of involving developers and those frontline staff in this process, because actually it transfers the ownership of security from the security team to the business in its entirety. So it kind of can be a really good collaboration tool and make those kind of developers feel valued for their expertise, as opposed to you quite often have this clash between development and security where one is seen as a blocker to the other, and it can help to bridge that gap as well. So there are business cultural benefits of doing this exercise as well. Sorry, Jason, for interrupting you.
You must have not a problem. So the system-led approach is longer and more comprehensive than the attacker-led, but actually helps businesses achieve a full, complete picture of the threats they're facing, and actually allows them to look in more detail at those threats, and again allows them to evaluate fully the risk of how that of the risk-based approach to the model, as to what risk they're willing to accept, whether they to quote Niki Lauda, whether that's 20% risk is completely acceptable or not, or whether they want a lower risk level than that.
So system-led helps quite often identify insider threats that maybe an attacker-led approach wouldn't identify, because it's looking at other parts of the business that are not necessarily related just to that one system that's under scrutiny.
Do you want to take this one, Jen?
Yeah, sure. So this one, before we move into the how to threat model, this just describes, so there are lots of different frameworks you can use for threat modeling, but actually they're all asking the same fundamental questions. So, what are we going to build? What could possibly go wrong with it? What can we do about it? And at that point, you then build in your system or your application. And the final stage is to verify that those kind of fixes that you put in place work. So did we do a good job of mitigating those risks that we identified during the threat modeling activity? As we said earlier, threat modeling is primarily a risk management activity. So I've just put this slide in about how to score risks. And these are some that, there are loads of different risk scoring methodologies, and lots of businesses actually have their own. But if you don't, this is a really simple one to follow. So you tend to score each of these areas out of 5. And then there's a calculation at the bottom, which will give you your overall risk value. So you're looking at how bad would an attack be, how easy is it to carry out, essentially, how many people would be impacted, and how easily would your business know that actually your devices had been compromised. So from that, you get a risk value score, which you then categorize as maybe high, medium, or low based on your risk tolerance level. Like I say, other risk scoring methodologies are available, but yeah, this is one that I quite like. So I think, Chris, you wanted to share some information at this point in the presentation before we move on to the framework.
It did. Thank you very much. We'll get on with part 2 of today's broadcast, excuse me, in a few moments. If you're watching this webinar live and you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, please ask away using the Zoom chat facility, and we'll put those to Jennifer and Jason during the Q&A section at the end. Sergio, I think you've got your hand up. If you want to ask your question in the chat facility, we'll certainly come to you a bit later on in the broadcast. Exhibitor opportunities are now limited, but they are still available for the 2023 IoTSF conference. Please go to iotsfconference.com for exhibitor details, as well as all of the speakers confirmed so far. Details of our training event in London the day after our conference is also available there. We've collaborated with 𝗀𝗵𝗆 to bring you that. And a bit of breaking news, even I will be on stage at the conference, because it was decided that basically somebody with a bit of gravitas, a bit of a heavyweight, somebody with credibility was needed to be added to the bill. They couldn't find anybody like that, unfortunately, so they asked me. Boom, boom. A bit off script as well. On Monday evening, the night before the 2023 IoTSF conference, just across the road from the venue on the Strand, Back to the Future the musical is taking place. So you could actually make a proper time of it in London on the Monday evening. You could go to the Adelphi Theatre to see Back to the Future, conference on Tuesday, training day on Wednesday. That's a fantastic time in London for you there, potentially. Just quickly before I hand back over to Jennifer and Jason, I want to tell you about the IoTSF Champion Award, which is presented every year at the prestigious TechWorks Dinner and Gala Awards. This year, the event takes place at the 47-storey Deansgate Hilton Hotel, which is a bona fide skyscraper in Manchester's city centre, and it's on Thursday, the 7th of December. The IoTSF Champion Award recognises organisations which demonstrates IoT cybersecurity stewardship and is open to all organisations involved in IoT. If you think that your organisation fits the bill, then please do apply. It costs only your time to fill in the online application, and the closing date for submissions is Friday the 13th of October. Go to techworksawards.com. So now the second course in today's Michelin Star Cybersecurity Banquet. I'm going to hand back over to Jennifer and Jason.